Threadbare, The Traveling Show by Alexandra Demers. Prologue, The Cage, May 17th, 1945, Parisville, formerly Greenville, South Carolina. Sangria barely had enough room to breathe. Head between her ankles, her entire body was crammed into a cage suspended 4 feet off of the ground. Even if she could move, she didn't dare try to readjust. Any movement would make the cage swing. How in the world did I end up here? Sangria took in what little she could of the dark room. The dry smell of dust and scattered straw made her eyes itch. Heavy canvas walls blocked most of the light and sounds from the outside, but they could never block the screams. She would hear them almost every night, coming closer and closer, until at last it was her turn. I hate the screams. I hate the gawkers. I hate the jeers. I hate this place. Sangria licked her lips. Juan should have let out his familiar, anguished howl by now. She had been hanging for much longer than ever before, and she was beginning to get a little worried. She wished she could look at her watch or move her ankles far enough apart to hear what was going on outside. Suddenly, she heard a rustle of paper. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey! How much longer do I have to sit like this? Are they coming soon or not?" "You're next," a young man's voice answered softly from a far corner. Sangria thought he had one of those accents that made anything spoken in a whisper sound intimate. He suppressed a little cough and added, "Settle down in there, or else you'll start swinging." "You need to repair this cage as soon as I'm out, Renee," she growled. "I have a huge wire poking me in the side. I'll hold you responsible if it tears my costume." Instead of an answer, she heard another flutter of paper. "Are you ignoring me?" she hissed. "Of course not, Shuri. Fix your cage. Got it." "What are you doing back there?" "Reading." "Reading what?" "Bon sang, you're talkative tonight," he murmured. "Perhaps I ought to make the cage a little smaller, no?" "What did you say, bozo?" Sangria rattled the tiny door, and the cage bobbed from side to side. "I said Nick must be captivating the crowd again." Renee chuckled and reached out to steady her confines. "So I'm reading the newspaper until everyone gets here." There was a pause, and since there was still no sign of her tormentors, Sangria raspberried in boredom. "Well, what does the news say?" Renee angled the paper so that the print was illuminated by a strip of light coming from a gap in the canvas walls. The widow of a local hero was arrested by inquestors. Seems that she's been sent to a prison in Uvestad. Sangria used the bars on her cage to scratch her nose. "What for?" "What else? Participating in the insurrection." He moved the paper through a strip of light, highlighting the important parts. She was married to a favored citizen, but he died in the war. She lost her fortune and lived in hiding until the inquestors dragged her from her home. He sighed and scanned a grocery ad for bargains. La pauvre, the war took everything from her. Odd that the Inkies would nab a favored citizen. Sangria felt a sneeze coming on, and she sniffed it back defiantly. They're practically American royalty. "Well, it's not so odd, considering this woman was an immigrant," Renee explained bitterly. "Not even her husband's status could save her in the end." Sangria rolled her eyes. "Since when did you give a fig about politics?" "Since when was sympathy political?" he shot back. Sangria's retort was cut off by a triple knock on the wall. "That's your cue." Renee tossed his newspaper aside and flew off of his stool. He pulled the fly hand over hand as fast as he could, raising the curtain with a whir. Time to untie the knot, freak. The room flooded with yellow light, and Sangria heard a woman's muted scream. Her insides roiled. Whatever happened to the gasps of wonder? She couldn't see the crowd, but she judged by the sounds of surprise that there must have been a group of 10 or 15 people standing in the dark outside. Audiences were always stunned by the way she managed to fit into a birdcage, perfectly framing her doll-like face with her arms and legs. Renee hid from the crowd behind the curtain, but the stage lights caught the edge of his rough hand as he gently set a needle down onto her record. The dented old phonograph played the eerie opening violin strains of Danse Macabre, and Sangria began to move out. She only had enough time in her performance to display the extent of her flexibility, so she moved in perfect sync with the music. One arm slid from the small opening first, then the rest of her torso. She gripped the chain that suspended her cage and freed her legs. Turning to the side, she dipped backwards so that her head touched her bottom as she stood. She deepened the bend until her head reached her ankles again, her arms outstretched for balance with practiced grace. "Now there's a bendy bird I'd love to stuff," came a quip from the audience, followed by sparse chuckles. Sangria snapped up straight and glared into the darkness. "Who said that?" "Can you wrap your gams clear around, not freak?" the heckler called back. "I'm a trained dancer and a concert violinist," she shouted before Renee dropped the curtain like a rock. Sangria crawled beneath the tattered canvas and scrambled out. "You're a goat-mothered bumpkin who's got to pay money before he can lay eyes on a real woman. Which one of us really belongs in the cage, huh?" She felt Renee's firm grip on her elbows, drawing her back. "Where you going, birdie?" the man in the audience hooted. "Tell your wrangler I haven't got my nickel's worth yet." "Come and get it, you hillbilly bastard!" Sangria thrashed against Renee, and his hands clamped down on her like manacles. "Get up here so I can choke you to death with my ankles and sell tickets at your funeral." Renee managed to pull her behind the curtain again. She was incredibly strong for somebody so petite, and he didn't release her until she stopped struggling. "That was certainly the most excitement we've had in a while," he said breathlessly, fanning himself with his wide-brimmed hat. Sangria fixed him with a green glare. "That man was out of line, chérie. Marmee won't blame you for getting upset." Sangria sniffed and wiped her eyes. "I've had enough," she mumbled, backing away from him. "I can't take this anymore." "What do you mean? You're not talking about leaving, are you?" Renee tilted his head. "Chérie, you can't." Sangria bit her lip and frowned at her backdrop instead of answering him. Her set was a silhouette of a tree, with dozens of tin birds that flew out of it on their own. It was inspired by Balinese shadow puppets, and Renee had spent months crafting it from scrap down to the most minute detail. Joined with her music and performance, the result was a breathtaking scene that was unusual for such a small traveling show. They both turned at the sound of coins falling into her lockbox outside. "Hear that?" he smiled, rubbing her shoulder. "She can threaten somebody with a humiliating death, and everyone will still love the knot freak." What Renee hoped would encourage Sangria had instead drove her into an outrage. "Don't you get it, you moron? I did not train my entire life just to be ogled for pocket change at some filthy little mud show." Shoving past Renee with a furious sob, she cried, "Damn them all, and damn you too! I will never be the knot freak again!"